What does it mean to be stoic? Does it mean keeping a straight face all the time? Does it mean never losing your cool? Or does it mean being cold and distant? On a surface level and casually speaking, yes, but simply showing a stoic attitude like this, similar to the characters I've put in the thumbnail of this video, does not actually make you stoic. What does is practicing the core principles of the philosophy itself. The most important ones being to only focus on what is in your control, to take full responsibility of your life, and to develop your emotional resilience. Putting in effort to progress in these areas is what will actually make you stoic, not simply changing your facial expressions overnight. So in this video, I'm going to cover these important principles to tell you how you can actually be stoic. You'll find many different pieces of helpful advice online when you search up how to be stoic, but I found that the majority of it can be summed up with the 3 principles that I've mentioned in the intro. So starting with the most important one, this is known as the dichotomy of control, which basically means to only focus on what is genuinely in your control and to accept what is not in your control. Understanding and applying this principle will help you to feel less negative and more present. To be stoic, you can't afford to be wasting time thinking about what most other people tend to fixate on. Overthinking about the past, worrying about the future, comparing yourself to others and relying on their opinions for validation, and complaining about your life but doing nothing to change it. A Stoic understands that having these thoughts is completely pointless because you're not actually taking action to change what you can. And though it may be normalized to complain about things like this without actually doing anything about it, all you're doing is causing yourself unnecessary emotional suffering. A Stoic learns to accept what is outside of their control and instead choose to take action on what they can do in the present moment to progress towards their goals. So what is genuinely in our control? It's simply our voluntary thoughts and actions. And said like that, it may feel like hardly anything at all, but in reality it's very empowering to know that no matter what situation you are in, you always have control over yourself. It's not about the cards that life deals us, it's about how we play them. And when you learn to do the best with what is genuinely in your control, and not focus on what is not, then you're practicing the core of Stoicism. Always ask yourself if you're fixating too much on what you have no power over, because the chances are that if you are someone who tends to feel negative a lot of the time, then you probably are focusing on what you shouldn't. A Stoic does not stress because they do not try to change what can't be changed. If you have a problem that's outside of your control, then don't focus on it because there's nothing you can do about it. But if you have a problem that's in your control, then simply do what you can to solve it. Either way, there's no place for stress in the mind of a Stoic. That's an overview of the dichotomy of control, but I have made a full video on this topic and how it can help you to stop suffering, so click the link on screen now if you're interested. Whatever happens in your life, your happiness and well-being is your responsibility, because these things are 100% in your control. We all have the ability to rationalize things and decide how to interpret the world around us. Either we can be victims to our circumstances and allow our emotions to take over, or we can decide to take responsibility for making the best out of what happens. Even when you feel hopeless or powerless in a situation, you always have the freedom to choose your attitude towards it. A Stoic knows that life is full of challenging times, but the whole point of Stoicism is how we choose to respond to these times. Blaming external circumstances or other people for how you feel is logically incorrect, because how you feel starts on the inside, and specifically it starts in your mind. And as a Stoic, you understand that you have complete control over your mind. There is nothing good or bad unless you choose to make it so. Now, it's only natural that we'll go through some very unfortunate circumstances in life, and these are bound to make us feel hurt or even awful. For example, being betrayed by somebody close to you, or having your belongings stolen, or losing your job. These things are bound to hurt you. But what Stoicism teaches us is that it's our responsibility to prevent ourselves from needlessly suffering by beating ourselves up and adopting a victim mentality. Being betrayed hurts, but it's not a reflection of you. It was the other person's choice, which was not in your control. Losing your job sucks, but it doesn't mean that you are fundamentally inadequate or that you'll never get another job again. And getting robbed and losing your belongings sucks, but as a Stoic, you learn to not attach your happiness to material goods in the first place. These are just some random examples of rational thought patterns that you can use to respond to hard situations instead of being at their mercy. It is completely your responsibility to decide what a difficult time means to you and whether or not you allow it to destroy you. Now, of course, when we are emotionally suffering, it's very hard to think this way and be rational. So let's look at how the Stoics dealt with negative emotions. Emotions arise from our interpretations of events. When you view something as good, you'll feel good, and vice versa. By now you know that how you choose to view the world is completely in your control. Therefore, how you feel is also your responsibility. The problem is that with negative emotions specifically, when they arise and become stronger in our minds, we tend to lose our ability to think rationally along with our composure. The Stoics knew this very well, and their solution wasn't to suppress their emotions, but to not allow them to overwhelm them. We can do this by developing our self-awareness and by staying calm. This is important because if you are not aware of the stories that your mind is telling you, then before you know it, you're feeding into a negative emotion and it's growing, and now you have lost your ability to think rationally and you're feeling miserable. Let's take a simple example that most of us can probably relate to. You message someone close to you and they don't reply for a long time. At first you don't care because you just assume that they're busy, so you feel calm. A little time goes by and you start to feel a little bit irritated because you assume that they must have seen your message by now. Then a lot of time passes and now you're feeling angry because your mind is telling you that they have definitely seen your message, but they're just choosing to ignore you on purpose. Suddenly they reply to you and your anger vanishes because you believe their explanation that they were in fact busy and they didn't have time to respond. This may seem like a relatively harmless example, but the danger here applies to all times that we feel negative. You have an irrational first impression and you are not aware of it. So before you know it, you're feeding into it and you're believing the stories that your mind is telling you, and you've lost your composure along with your sense of calmness. This is why you must have awareness. As soon as you have that initial impression that doesn't really make a lot of sense, you need to question it immediately. In this case, it was, they must have seen my message. Because our minds will tell us ridiculous things in order to justify our negative emotions. Why? Well, it's going to seem paradoxical, but the truth is that we enjoy indulging in our own pain, as it avoids us taking responsibility for how we feel. But the Stoics reject this. They have the awareness to step back and examine their thoughts objectively to stop the negative emotion from growing any stronger. And this is not easy at all, but the first step is always awareness. Too many of us choose to take the easy way out instead, by suppressing our emotions or coping with video games, alcohol, junk food, etc. Because we can't handle facing our own emotions. But a Stoic knows that negative emotions are simply an unavoidable part of life, so they get better at managing them. For a more in-depth and practical look at how you can do this, I'll put a link to a video I've made on this topic on screen now. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope you now understand what it means to actually be Stoic. Subscribe for more life advice, and I'll see you in my next video.